So, hello.
Hey everyone.
Hi, Mari.
Everyone. Get my agenda open. So welcome everyone. And today is 7th of August and this is Delivery Weekly. I have put a couple of announcements in the async section of the agenda for you to read, but I'm going to jump to the most exciting part of the discussion, which is to welcome Dat. Dat, welcome to Delivery and to GitLab actually. So I would say, do you want to give us a little intro, Dat? Just tell us a little bit about yourself. You'll definitely meet everyone one-to-one, but just so people can hear some stuff about you. I can't hear you at the moment. Is it just me?
No,
Oh,
can't hear.
So I put you on the spot about being able to GitLab.
First day technical challenges.
Yeah. I tell you what, I'll loop back to you, Dat. I'll reorder these things so you've got a few minutes so we don't awkwardly just watch you whilst you try and do these. But I will come back to you, but it's great to have you on the team. So welcome.
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, hey, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Welcome.
Now I think it's better. Hi everyone. So I'm Dat. Yeah. So I'm from Vietnam, but right now I'm in Germany. So yeah, today is my first day in delivery orchestration team. So still quite struggling with all the account setup and so on. So I don't think I can do anything or can start anything with the team today and probably for the next week. I'm sure about that. But yeah, so really looking forward to work with all of you. Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome. Don't worry, we will get you to work very rapidly. So focus on your onboarding and then we'll throw you in.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Discussion items. Maren, welcome to Delivery Weekly.
Yeah, haven't been to one of these in a couple of years actually, because I have overlap always at this time, and I actually jumped from another meeting to come here to talk a bit about this. So yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about cells and GitLab dedicated, because you probably all heard about it somewhere, but we need to start thinking more about it ourselves, like on the delivery team side as well. And I wanted to kind of share a bit of a direction change for delivery that is going to play out in this quarter. To start first with, note that on the orchestration side, the two OKRs that currently exist around security releases and the change of the monthly release date, that we need to do, that needs to happen. Like there is no change on that side. But as I was reviewing the work that is remaining for the blue-green deploys, specifically from the system team side, and then also aligning some of the other direction items that we have on the dedicated side and elsewhere, became apparent that we are probably not going to get the most out of the work that all of you would be doing on the setup that is necessary for the blue-green deploys or shifting traffic, or I forgot how you named the project. And the challenge with that is we specifically have to start thinking in different scale when it comes to cells, for example. Right now, we're talking about 1 to 2 environments at any given point in time, which when cells gets introduced into GitLab.com architecture, the scale changes to n number of cells all of a sudden. And doing any work on existing tooling seems a bit wasteful. And I'm really concerned that if we continue that direction, we'll get ourselves into a situation where not only that we didn't manage to finish all of the work that is necessary to support the goal that we wanted, but also that we will need to do a major shift later on when dedicated on GCP becomes a thing, and when we need to start thinking about how we will do the same thing within this new architecture. So as part of that, I've been talking with Sam, Amy, and Michele to start focusing more on building out the new tooling on top of what currently is GitLab dedicated, and then learning on that side of the architecture and being prepared when the cells architecture does come in. I don't know how much detail you all have when it comes to cells. Cells is relatively fast moving, but I think there are 2 dimensions to cells work. One is the application side, and that's something that that tenant scale group is working on, which is detangling how the application actually works internally so that it can operate in an isolated fashion, right? Like one unit can operate in an isolated fashion. But on the other side, we have the infrastructure side. And the infrastructure side is imagined to be on top of GitLab dedicated, where we have a sufficient automation and then also sufficient isolation for each cell that is being deployed. What we currently don't have is tooling and orchestration necessary to deliver GitLab to those instances in, I'm trying to avoid to use orchestrated way, but I can't use another word. Like I don't want to tie a team to this.
Coordination.
Coordination, in a coordinated manner, yes. And I think delivery is best positioned to start investing time in understanding how we can actually make that better there, and through proxy that will land on GitLab.com eventually. So instead of doing some short-term work right now, we're more aligning towards the North Star that is being set by Jorg, and not only Jorg, but also a company which is making sure that cells architecture is doable for GitLab.com. And I'm looking to see how we can start that on that right now. That would mean, though, that Q3 OKR for delivery system team will need to change, not necessarily the type of work that needs to be done, but the target of that work. This would mean that instead of us focusing on building functionality for rolling out traffic or for moving traffic between different instances of GitLab.com, that we would need to focus on that same thing, but within a smaller unit, which is GitLab dedicated in this case. The benefit of that is direct to our dedicated customers, because right now we do not have any guarantees around GitLab version rollouts, whether there is going to be any downtime or not. And this work could help us out there directly, so immediate impact on our customers. And like I said, through proxy, it's going to land on GitLab.com eventually as well. But then also, there is quite a lot of coordination that needs to happen between delivery and dedicated teams to automate some of the actions that are currently manual, and to satisfy some of the requirements that exist specifically for dedicated. So there is quite a bit to unpack in what I'm saying here, but the gist of it is that OKR for Q3 we will need to adapt for system team. And then in reviewing the capacity we have, we will also need to kind of fuzzy the lines between system and orchestration a bit and work together, all together on all three targets that we currently have. Previously, this was set on system only, specifically the traffic routing, and the release changes, orchestration changes were on orchestration only. And because of the capacity that we have in the team and the release manager shifts that exist in the next couple of months, we'll need to all work together. So it's not going to be a specific team works only on their specific task. We're going to have to mix and match to actually support the capacity we have. All right, I'm going to stop talking. I see a lot of concerned looking faces here, so I'll take any questions.
So just to clarify, you said we need to build tooling that will help dedicated first, and then eventually that will also be used with cells.
Correct.
Okay, so the tooling for dedicated, will it be for stuff like traffic shifting, or will we also be building tooling for what we have currently for GitLab.com, like regular deployments?
Both. We're starting with something that is a topic for Q3 for system already, which is traffic routing. Single dedicated instance does not have that. We depend on GitLab Environment Toolkit and whatever they claim to be zero downtime deploy, which is in most cases not, which means that a single dedicated instance can experience some downtime, which is not something that we want. The traffic routing capability we would add in dedicated now would help immediately the customers we have on dedicated, but through the work that is happening on a completely separate line, which is adding GitLab dedicated to GCP. So we have a whole team starting up to work on dedicated on GCP. One of the first cells that we would have to set up on GitLab.com will be on GCP, which means that any work you would do now would land the same way on dedicated on GCP.
And maybe just to expand on that a little as well. So to maybe another bit to your question there, Ruben, is when we deploy to .com, we are creating and validating a package as well as doing the rollout. I think for this one, we'll be, at least initially, focusing on an existing package will be rolled out safely, and we do the traffic routing. And then there's probably a phase a little bit further along where we work out exactly what is in the package and validate the package. For now, dedicated on N-1. So we have a really nice solid package that we can be using for this phase.
Yeah, so in the short term, that's going to be the focus. But again, in the long run, delivery group will have to focus on functionality that will allow us to observe M cells that exist and ensure that our rollout, not only within a single cell, but also rollout across N cells is safe. And for that, I think you are all best positioned to drive those initiatives. That means all the tooling that we either currently have or will need to build will probably come from the not organization, but like a delivery group in general, right? Like all the dashboards that we need, all the views around which package is where, what version of GitLab is where, and how is the system reacting to the package change. All of that will be within delivery group.
And also to clarify, this is going to be like the work also beyond the Q3, correct? Like
Correct.
until it's done.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so this very moment, we don't have a project formulated, which means in the next 2 weeks, we'll have to dive deeper to understand the type of work that needs to happen. But we need to start immediately, not to invest time into something that we would scrap anyway within a year.
And I think we've got the very, very, very first bare bones bit of what the project will look like. So we have quite a few things we already know. We know that we don't know anything about dedicated. So we know a big piece of our project will be understanding dedicated, understanding the current infrastructure, architecture, and looking at how we can make use of it. We learned quite a lot in Q2, so it'll be working out how do we bring that knowledge across to Q3, what tools do we like the look of, what problems can we see, and we also know quite a lot about the pain points of being a release manager. So it would be a really good idea, I think, given the scales of cells, that we try and eliminate some of those manual points or the pain points that we currently experience day to day. So we have a few pieces like that will give us enough to get started. And then, yeah, we'll shape up the project in the next few weeks.
And the tooling that we'll be building will not be part of the product, or like, is that open for
it is
debate?
100% open for building it within product. I would very much rather prefer that we take time to actually build something in the product that would allow us to do this. And we have support not only from product, but also from engineering leadership to do so, which is why I firmly believe that folks in this group are the best position to do that. You all have the experience of working within GitLab, the product, and to varying degrees, but I think between SREs and backend engineers, we can actually make some of these tools that are currently outside of the product. We can make them inside of the product and make it easier on ourselves as well. So just for full context, some of that tooling was built at a time where there were like huge product sections missing or not fully formulated. So we needed to do something to actually get ahead. But now that we kind of have a full outline of what our release process looks like, we're not going to be changing things significantly. There's no reason why we wouldn't be starting with product first approach. And if we are blocked anywhere with that, you have an escalation path.
Because with cells, it sounds like, starting to treat, I suppose cells are similar to environments. I haven't read much about the architecture of cells, but with n number of cells, it'll become, you'll have to treat environments as cattle rather than, so.
Correct.
The delivery dashboard that we've been talking about will come in very useful.
Indeed. Any other questions? All right, I have a final remark. So first of all, if you're wondering why delivery is going through this direction change, and if you feel like you're alone in this, you're not. That's number one. Scalability team already is shifting some of their deliverables towards dedicated as well. So for example, some of the capacity planning tooling that was developed for GitLab.com is now in this quarter already being planned out for dedicated, right? Because we need to figure out how to plan for capacity within dedicated, every single instance. And that will, through proxy, mean that this will land back to GitLab.com through dedicated as well. So we're moving from this single large instance view towards many, many smaller instances view. So what has applied previously on a big instance, there is no reason why it shouldn't apply on a number of smaller instances. It's just the scale is different. So that's already changing. And with the changes around the general direction of cells and the timelines that are being set, you're talking about 18 to 24 months timeline for cells on GitLab.com. I've realized that we do not have much time on our side to get ahead to build this tooling that will allow us to support cells as well. So instead of taking our time to understand context or concepts on a single instance of this scale, which is a different this is a different problem than a single instance on smaller scale. This is like why this is now happening. Why is it late? Why I couldn't have done this in 3 weeks ago? Simple answer is because it simply played out that way. Engineering offsite was 2 weeks ago. The planning for OKRs, or 3 weeks ago, I guess now, 2 weeks ago actually. OKR planning happened after the fact, and then only when I stepped back and looked through all of the OKRs last week when the quarter started, and I understood all the moving pieces, that's where this became apparent. So my fault that this didn't happen earlier. Cool. Any other questions? All right. That's it for me, Amy.
I have a question actually. Maybe you don't know the answer, but how the current work on migrating dedicated GCP is you think is gonna impact the work we are going to do in this quarter for shifting the traffic of dedicated?
Good question. I don't expect that there is going to be any change because I believe you all will probably have to work on the level of GitLab environment toolkit rather than on the level of cloud provider. The only annoying thing about this is going to be that you'll all need access to AWS sandboxes to set up dedicated because it's very much tied to that provider until the porting to GCP happens. So I think when it comes to the tooling you'll have at your disposal, it's going to be a bit different to what we have on GCP, which might actually force you all to think in more generalist terms, how this would work across clouds rather than tying to specific tooling.
So the abstractions will be all built in Get. Also, this means for the entire team to start to spin up some access requests because not all of us have AWS. So
yes, that's a good call out. We can do that async to align a bit on what's needed, and then we can go from there.
And we take the onboarding of dedicated to match the entitlements that we might need.
We can work on that for sure. Right now, I think we can just create a bulk access request. I can help you out with that and get all the access provisioned and share some documentation around what it looks like to provision a sandbox environment within your environment, and then we can go from there.
Thank you.
Cool. Awesome.
Great, thanks for sharing. For kind of next steps then, so Sam, Michele, and I have already started talking about a updated OKR to reword the existing system OKR. So we'll have that to share very shortly. We also have a call already scheduled with the system people. If anyone else wants to jump in, that is tomorrow. We were talking about the first iteration. We were going to talk about the first iteration of the existing OKR. We'll now talk about the first iteration of the new OKR and work out what the next steps will be for that. So we get some issues created and people can start picking those up.
And we'll start the access requests in parallel.
Excellent. And in addition, if you have any other concerns or anything like that, please use your one-to-ones, raise them up. We can chat about this more for sure.
I'm also available if you want to ask me some questions direct. Set up a time with me if you want.
Do we need to understand what automation dedicated already has, or we'll be building something entirely separate?
You have to understand what dedicated already has, and which is why the sandbox environments are going to be important. And also, you'll need to follow the documentation the delivery dedicated team has for setting up sandbox environments, and that will allow you to follow what exists there. It's really not that hard to do. Like, I do it myself, and if I can do it, then I'm sure everyone else can.
Okay, thanks very much, everyone.
I'm going to drop off. I have 3 minutes before my next call. Thanks so much for listening, and please reach out if you have questions.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
So, does anyone have anything else they want to talk about on that topic? Or, well, no, for a second. Does anyone have any other questions, comments for that topic? I think one thing I want to just mention, because we haven't talked about it much, because we haven't yet got a plan, is Marion mentioned about us blurring the lines between the teams a bit to achieve the 3 goals. So Michele and I haven't chatted about this exactly yet. So I think we will take a look at that. What we will most likely do, I think, is try and have a more fluid sort of arrangement, so as people can stay in touch with all the projects, but we can also sort of swarm on the most important things. So we will figure out a plan and come back to you all with a bit of an idea for how we might be able to manage that one.
Yeah, I'd just say it'd be, great if we get the dedicated tooling working. I think we have to understand it really well. But I wouldn't say it's an absolute hard requirement that it must be 100% dedicated tooling. We can't add, adapt, or change it to kind of get some of this done.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, this I'm sure will be the first of several conversations about this. So please just shout when you have questions or any concerns or not sure what happens next. But let's hand over to release managers.
Okay, let me share my screen. Did the deployment to production finish? Ah, yes. Okay, so I'll start with the auto deploy dashboard. Last week wasn't too bad. We just had a few incidents, one big one, but otherwise it was a pretty easy week, I think. This was a QA failure. the other two. One was also a QA failure. I think the other one was a migration failure because of config change.
Just
Number
before
of
you move on, Ruben, from that. So there is a, I think it's a chatops command that turns failing migrations into no ops. I am trying to track down the documentation for that because I think there is some, but I just wanted to mention it because Myra mentioned last week that this was undocumented. My understanding was it was documented. So I'm trying to find that, but just to mention on this call, it does exist. And so if you get a failing migration, it should now be possible to switch it to a no op and continue on.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned it. And so in one of the incidents we had last week, we didn't know that there was a chatops command. So the SRE on call manually SSH into the Rails console and ran a command. So in that incident, someone mentioned the chatops command. So if I find it, I'll link it to delivery Slack channel.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Number of deployments, I think, was high, about 8 last week. Not as high as one of the weeks in July, but still pretty high. Lead time also is not bad. For the lead time on Monday, we added a new metric that might be able to help over there. Let me just. So we've only had one deployment to production today. So this is the standard lead time metric, which basically just counts the time between deployment of a merge request and merge of a merge request. So the problem is if something gets merged on Friday and it gets deployed on Monday, it gets counted as a 3-day lead time. But we don't deploy on weekends, so we should not be counting weekends. So this is a metric that does not count weekends. So you can see there's a big difference in the average. Now, this is just one deployment. So I'm hoping that if we don't count weekends for an entire month, we might get a better idea of how close we are to the 12-hour target for MTTP.
I still feel like MTTP is accurate. If as a developer you merge on a Friday, your change is not landing till Monday. So that in that sense, it feels accurate. But it'll be interesting to see. But I do think MTTP is a realistic number, even though, because I think the other problem it's indicating is that we don't have reliable enough deployments so they can be running without a release manager online. So that's why we don't deploy at the weekends. If we had a fully automated rollout system and the batches were small and we had like auto rollback, we could deploy at the weekends and then you'd get a shorter MTTP.
That does make sense. But
so it'll be interesting to see,
useful.
but I think this is a slightly different. I don't think we should consider MTTP to be inaccurate. It's just, it's a little bit, you lose some granularity.
Okay. Yeah. So one thing that I found interesting was if you look at the MTTP through the week, so for example, say 1st to 5th, you get something like 10 hours. And then Monday comes around and it jumps to like 20 hours or something.
Yeah. And it's also reflecting, it's also unfortunate because it's probably reflecting a kind of working habit in that we probably get a lot more things merging on a Friday afternoons compared to, say, for example, Monday mornings. And it's why I don't think necessarily something Steve and I were chatting about the other week, just doing a lot of deployments in our day probably doesn't shift MTTP too much because some of those deployments may not have very many changes. and then there are times we get a lot of MRs, and if we don't deploy after that, probably, for example, Friday evening, we get loads of merges. We then don't deploy those till Monday, and you lose, you know, quite a lot of them have lower, slower numbers.
Yeah. It would be nice if we tracked the size of each change set that gets deployed, so then we could see when the maximum number of changes get deployed.
Yeah, exactly.
So I suppose this will never replace our official MTTP, but it would be interesting to see what the value is when you remove weekends. If
Yeah,
nothing
it's
else.
nice as an internal metric, isn't it? Just for the team to see if anything's wildly off week to week.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Where did I reach? Lead time. Okay, so that's a lead time. Blockers. So we had a total of 9 hours, I think, 8 hours. 8 hours last week. So this number is not very accurate, I think. I think there were like 3 blockers. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 blockers were there with 8 hours.
Do you mind updating the numbers just on the table at the top and also on the one linked over, so that when I pull those up into the release manager metrics, I get the right numbers?
Should we change this automation to count? Currently, I think it counts the release blocker label. Instead, we could count whichever incidents or whichever issues have the labels indicating that staging or production were blocked.
Sure, if you
I
want
think
to.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it looks like
Yeah.
there's just 3 there, not 4.
This one as well. So like 1, 2, 3.
But that one's only blocking G staging. Are we counting the staging ones as production
Yeah.
blockers?
Yeah. So
They're
these
not
are just
production.
Oh.
They renamed.
so it's just blockers now, not production blockers. Okay, so I'll open an MR to update this.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Nice. Any questions for the release managers?
I did want to add the one thing that's been noticeable is that, at least during my time zone, instead of regularly getting out 2 to 3 deployments, we've been able to get out 3 to 4 due to all of these improvements on the overall timeline of the deployment. So I'm used to it being 2.5 hours, and now it's 1.5 hours for each deployment for staging and production. So it's quite nice.
That's great. That's really great.
Staging now deploys in 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really good. And as part of the availability work in July, Quality switched a bunch of test suites on the merge pipeline to be blocking when previously they hadn't been. And this was a direction they were working towards. But they made use of the availability kind of focus to turn it on. So I'm hoping that we will start to see a lot less test failures in our deployment pipelines, because things should be failing on the merge pipelines. So that will be interesting for us to see as well over the next few months. Cool. Okay, great. Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up on the recording? No? Okay, I shall stop it.